Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush. We're glad to have you here today. What to make of this as it all comes together? I'm first of all just want to get your initial response to what we're learning.
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be great to finally get this laid out. I mean, if you look at what happened with Andrew McCabe and the report about one narrow portion of this that was released earlier a few weeks ago, it was so detailed. It wasn't just conclusions. It was, we think he lied, and here's where he lied, and here's four pieces of evidence proving that he was lying. And I think that's the detail you're going to be looking at, which is why it's such a long report. And so I think it's going to be great to finally get some conclusions from somebody who's generally trusted by both sides of the aisle in terms of Inspector General Horowitz as to what happened with Comey, what happened with AG Lynch, what happened with McCabe. All those people are going to be addressed in this, and we'll see what happens. But I'm looking forward to it because we'll finally have clarity rather than speculation.
You know, there were calls just recently for a second special counsel among Republicans who wondered whether or not the Inspector General would have the reach to be able to go after people who had since left these agencies, the FBI and DOJ. You can ask them to testify, but the IG wouldn't be able to compel them to the same way a special counsel would. But when you hear about the length of this and potentially the depth, what do you say?
I mean, I have much faith in Inspector General Horowitz. I've dealt with him in my private practice and made a couple of referrals to him even during the last administration. And, you know, no political bias one way or the other. He took action when it was warranted. You know, people lost their jobs. I mean, he's not afraid of the political consequences of something. And they do have a lot of authority. I mean, because again, people aren't going to willy-nilly give up a government job to avoid an interview with the Inspector General unless they're pretty convinced they've got real problems. So, I mean, he was able to interview Comey. He was able to interview McCabe. He's been able to interview lots of people. So, I mean, let's see the report. And I think there's a U.S. attorney who does have a grand jury ability, who's overseeing this and is going to make prosecutorial decisions. So there's pieces of the case that need to be filled out. John Huber in Utah will be able to take care of that as well. So I think DOJ pretty well has this covered to the extent there's things that need to be prosecuted coming out of it.
You know, it's interesting, and we've had some of the members of the Senate Judiciary Committee on this very program in recent days, and I've been asking them, because it kept getting delayed and delayed, when they would actually be able to ask questions of IG Horowitz. And now it looks like that's going to happen right after the release a few days later, June 18th. We've got that on the bottom of the screen for viewers. Real quickly, what would be among some of the things that you'd like to see the senators ask?
Well, I think what I'd want them to see them ask is, you know, were all the emails there? You know, were any documents altered or destroyed? You know, who was not truthful with them? And really, you know, ask them for some broader conclusions of, do you think there was a problem with bias at the head of the FBI? Or do you think, you know, there were some individual cases of misconduct and they don't really connect to each other? But I want the broader picture about whether there's a systemic problem at the top of the FBI and DOJ in that investigation. And I don't know one way or the other what's true, but I think Mr. Horowitz probably has a pretty good idea by this point.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because if you break this up and you say, okay, there was the bias of Strzok and Page against President Trump, and then there was potential bias in terms of how the Hillary Clinton email scandal or investigation was handled as well, those are separate. So as it pertains to Hillary Clinton, we do know that emails and things were destroyed. We already know part of that story.
Well, that's going to be outside the IG. I mean, her actual underlying conduct will be technically outside of the IG's report. What will be within the IG report is how they reacted to it and handled that. So I suspect, and I don't know this to be the case, but Horowitz would be free to draw some conclusions and say, well, when you have a destruction of evidence, it's unusual that someone wouldn't be charged. Or if you allow someone to sit in as an attorney to a witness who's also a subject of the investigation, that's contrary to DOJ procedure. So I think those are the kinds of findings you'll find, not anything conclusive about Hillary's emails themselves.
Your job as a former Deputy Assistant Attorney General was basically to build a case and prosecute somebody. Do you see that happening as we move forward? And particularly in the Hillary Clinton point where she said, well, nothing is ever going to happen to her because she didn't do anything wrong. Does this report have a potential of pointing to anything that would have been illegal in that regard? Or are we just searching for facts to know what happened?
I think that it's focused less on Hillary Clinton. I mean, I think for good or for ill, I think that investigation's probably over. Even if there was, even if the decision was incorrect, I don't. I think it would be hard for the government to come back after her. But I think you could get some pretty strong conclusions about whether or not there was improper conduct by the folks that were supposed to be investigating that, and went on to investigate, the Trump-Russia connection as well.
Robert Driscoll, thank you for your time and expertise. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me on.